Hello everyone and welcome to this video. This is going to be a short, sharp little Astrology 101 lesson, and if you want to go more in depth and are more interested in learning more about this, I highly recommend joining us over on my Patreon community where I do a deeper dive into this energy, what it represents, and yeah, a lot more where that came from. There's hundreds and hundreds of videos out there too. So today I'm going to be talking about the chart ruler and how to find your chart ruler. And why it's important. So I'm going to be using my whiteboard because I like visual components when I'm talking about things and when I'm learning, and I am going to do that for you guys as well, just in case that makes it easier for you. So the chart ruler, why it is important to understand first of all is because the energy is filtered through the entire chart through this planet. What is the chart ruler? The chart ruler is the ruling planet of your entire birth chart. This is something that is kind of underused in astrology, in my opinion, unless you're dealing with deeper astrology. And I feel like it gives us a lot of insight and understanding as to how to work with the higher potentials of our birth chart. The chart ruler is obviously an actual planet that is basically like looking at it as this planet is the king or the queen of our chart, and all other planets, all other energies get filtered through that chart, that planet, and manifest throughout the entire chart. So I know that often we look at the sun sign as being the king or the queen energy in astrology and astronomy. However, when it comes to the snapshot of the chart ruler, this is a little bit different. It's more personalized. Now, some caveats. To understand your chart ruler, you will need to know your rising sign, and to know your rising sign, you do need to know your time of birth to make sure it's accurate. If you don't know your time of birth, the astrological rule of thumb is always to go based on 12 p.m. However, this is not necessarily going to be an accurate snapshot of what your rising sign is, because the rising sign changes degrees every 2 hours in terms of where it's located. So the rising sign or ascendant sign is very key and important here to understand what the chart ruler is. It doesn't mean that you can't get something without your time of birth, and most of the time when you're using astrological software, when you click that you don't know your time of birth, it is going based on a 12 p.m. time, but this doesn't necessarily mean that is what your actual rising sign is. So for those of you who don't know your time of birth, this is going to be a little bit more difficult and maybe not quite as accurate as well. So on an astrological wheel, obviously we have the 12 houses and we have the 12 star signs. So we have an axis though that is extremely key. So we have a 4-quarter axis that's very key. At the top we have the MC, or what's known as the midheaven. At the bottom we have the IC. Then we have on this side the ascendant or the rising sign. And then on this side, we have the descendant. So these are the key points that we're looking at today. The rising sign is always going to be your first house. The descending sign is always going to be the 7th house. I've gone into a little bit more detail in Patreon talking about some factors that can come in that can make some changes. For example, the types of charts that we rule and how they can maybe visually change things, and why that doesn't affect the fact that this is still 1st house and 7th house. So I'm going to just write that there. 1st house and 7th house. So to know what your chart ruler is, as I've said, we need to know what the rising sign is. You can find this out in 90% of any astrological software these days. And then once you know what your rising sign is, I'm going to use myself as an example just because it's easy to talk about. So my rising sign is Capricorn, which automatically is going to put my descendant as Cancer because this is the opposite signs. So once you know what your star sign is, that is your rising sign, you can then find the planetary ruler. So for Capricorn, for example, the planet that rules Capricorn is Saturn. In terms of your planets, so I'm just going to list them quickly because we do have some interesting aspects. So the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, then we have Jupiter and Saturn. I'm going to put a line here because we have our ancient planets, which I'm sorry, you guys can't actually see that. There we go. So we have our ancient planets, which is ancient astrology. Then we have the more modern planets, which is Uranus, Neptune. I've forgotten Mars in here. I always forget someone. Let me pop Mars up here. Mars. Then Venus. Sorry, Mars. Last time I did this, I forgot Jupiter. And then we have Pluto. The reason why I've done this is because of our star signs. So for example, the sun rules Leo. So if you have a Leo rising, your planetary ruler or your chart ruler is going to be the sun. The moon is Cancer. Mercury is Gemini and Virgo. Mars is Aries. Venus is Taurus and Libra. Jupiter is Sagittarius. Saturn is Capricorn. Now, when we're dealing, this is why it's important to understand this cusp, this line. The reason why I feel like it's important is because in terms of astrology, we have Western astrology is based on the way the sky looked roughly 2,000 years ago, which is why when you look from an astronomical point of view, things aren't actually in the constellations like we say they are. So 2,000 years ago, we didn't have these three planets. So when we're dealing with modern astrology versus ancient astrology, we need to understand the difference. And the reason why is because obviously Uranus rules Aquarius in modern astrology, Neptune is Pisces, Pluto is Scorpio. But in ancient astrology, when we come back to our main players here, Mars also ruled Scorpio, Jupiter also ruled Pisces, and Saturn also ruled Aquarius. Now, why is this important? Because if you have a rising sign that is Aquarius, Pisces, or Scorpio, you can look at two planets. You can look at your ancient planet and you can also, your ancient planet or your modern planet, and you can work with both, or you can choose the one that resonates the most for you. Now, once you understand which planet rules your rising sign, that's how you know your chart, what your chart ruler is. So your ruling planet. So for me, for example, being a Capricorn, Saturn is my ruling planet, or my chart ruler. What does that mean once you know what your chart ruler is? So the chart ruler represents understanding how every other component in your birth chart, every other planet is going to filter through the energy of Saturn, for me, as an example. Now, the next component you can look to is understanding where your planet is situated. So for me, it's quite simple because I have a stellium in Capricorn, so my Saturn is actually located in the first house, because your ruling planet is not necessarily going to be in the same house. So you could have a Capricorn rising, but Saturn might be situated over here in Cancer, for example. Or you might have Saturn in Leo, or you might have Saturn in somewhere else, in another part of your chart. So it doesn't change the fact that it's your chart ruler. The chart ruler, as I said, is always the ruler of the astrological zodiac sign that rules your ascendant. So why is it important to know where it's situated? Because if he's in a different house, so let's say, for example, he's over here in Cancer for me, which is my 7th house, then he's going to take on that Cancerian energy or Cancerian quality, and it's going to take on that 7th house energy as well. So he may not be as intense as he would be, like for me, for example, he's in the 1st house, so his energy is very intense there. So knowing where it is going to change slightly the tone or the energy. This is why for sometimes some people, you know, you might, if you had this, for example, if people met me, they might not say I felt like a Capricorn rising, they might say I felt more like a Cancer rising, and that's because my ruling planet of the ascendant is in that energy and it's taking on that tone. So this is where astrology can get a little bit more complicated and complex when we start to connect in the dots and understand these things. Why am I saying this is so important to understand though? Because when you understand your chart ruler, once you know what your chart ruler is, you can work with your chart ruler to work positively or understand the lessons that your entire chart is going to take on, the tones it is going to take on, and you can work with this energy. So when you keep your chart ruler happy, the rest of your chart manifests in a more simplistic way, because all of the other planets, because they filter their energy through Saturn as your chart ruler. This is my interpretation. This doesn't mean that every astrologer is going to agree with this either. I just want to put that little caveat in there. That's how I work with the chart ruler. Because everything is going through Saturn. If he's unhappy, if you're working against his energy or whatever your planet ruler is, if you're working against that in your life, then it means that every other planet is going to feel like they've got a bit of a weight attached to them because he's not happy or she, if you've got a feminine planet. So I am going to be diving deeper into this in Patreon, in understanding how to keep your planets happy, how to work with these energies. I do explain it a little bit more in Patreon as well if you're interested in understanding more about that. But yeah, I just wanted to do a quick little short video of understanding chart rulers. So I hope this has made sense to you. Let me know if you have any questions down below regarding this energy, but this is the easiest way to understand what the chart ruler is in your astrological chart and why it's so important. And I will be trying to do some more of these educational videos, short and sharp little 101s with astrology. I'm going to be looking at these other key components in the astrological chart as well as plenty of other things. But again, I am going further in depth in Patreon, and I just want to give a big thanks to my Patreon members because I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you very much for your support. And thank you everyone for being here. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you soon. Bye.